September 14, 1984, 2:17 p.m. The Cotton Club, Memphis, Tennessee. 26-year-old Prince Rogers Nelson stood outside the most prestigious music venue in the city, holding a signed contract for what was supposed to be 3 sold-out shows during his Purple Rain World Tour. But club owner Raymond "Big Ray" Morrison, a 58-year-old man who had built his fortune maintaining Memphis's old social hierarchies, looked Prince directly in the eyes and said the words that would seal his own financial destruction. "I don't care how famous you are, boy. This is a respectable establishment for respectable people. We don't book your kind of music, and we sure don't book your kind of performer." What Morrison didn't understand was that he wasn't just refusing a concert, he was challenging an artist who had the business acumen, industry connections, and strategic brilliance to turn one act of discrimination into a complete economic collapse. In exactly 72 hours, Morrison would discover that some people you don't say no to, not because they're vindictive, but because they have the power to make no cost everything you own. If you believe that the most powerful response to discrimination is not anger but systematic action that ensures such behavior becomes financially impossible, please subscribe to witness how one artist transformed racial prejudice into a business lesson that an entire industry would never forget. The Cotton Club in Memphis had been operating since 1962, built during the height of the civil rights movement by Raymond Morrison, who had inherited both money and attitudes from his father's cotton plantation empire. By 1984, the club was one of the South's premier music venues, featuring a 800-seat capacity, state-of-the-art sound systems, and a location that made it essential for any major tour passing through the region. Morrison had carefully cultivated the Cotton Club's reputation as an upscale venue that attracted wealthy white clientele who wanted to experience safe versions of black music, blues and jazz performed by artists who understood their place within Memphis's unspoken social contract. The club's booking policies had always been discriminatory, but Morrison maintained plausible deniability by claiming his decisions were based on musical fit rather than racial considerations. Prince's Purple Rain World Tour was breaking attendance records across the country, with many venues selling out within hours of tickets going on sale. His Memphis shows had been booked months in advance through his management company, which had negotiated the Cotton Club contract based on Prince's commercial success and the financial guarantees his performances represented. But Morrison had agreed to the contract before fully understanding what Prince represented: a black artist who refused to be categorized, controlled, or contained by the entertainment industry's traditional racial boundaries. Prince's music crossed genre lines, his performances challenged social conventions, and his success came on his own terms rather than through accommodation to white comfort levels. When Prince's advance team arrived at the Cotton Club on September 12 for the standard pre-show technical meeting, Morrison's attitude became immediately apparent. He questioned every aspect of Prince's production requirements, complained about the excessive number of black crew members, and made comments about maintaining the venue's family-friendly atmosphere that barely concealed his real concerns about Prince's provocative image. The final confrontation came when Prince himself arrived at the club on September 14 for the mandatory walkthrough that all headlining artists conducted before major performances. Morrison had been drinking since early afternoon, emboldened by support from several local businessmen who shared his views about maintaining Memphis's traditional social order. Prince entered the Cotton Club accompanied by his tour manager Steve Fardnoli and his security chief Charles "Chick" Huntsberry. Prince was dressed casually but expensively, carrying himself with the quiet confidence that had become his trademark. He was there to review stage specifications, sound system capabilities, and security arrangements, standard procedures that ensured optimal performance conditions. Morrison intercepted Prince before he could begin his venue inspection, positioning himself between Prince and the stage in a gesture that was clearly intended as territorial assertion. "Hold up there, son," Morrison said, his voice carrying the kind of false friendliness that poorly masked obvious hostility. "We need to have ourselves a little conversation before you go any further." Prince stopped and looked at Morrison with polite attention, assuming this was some kind of standard venue protocol he hadn't encountered before. Mr. Morrison, I'm Prince Nelson. I'm here for the technical walkthrough we scheduled for this afternoon. Yeah, well, that's what we need to discuss, Morrison replied, glancing toward the small group of local businessmen who had gathered to witness what he clearly intended as a public demonstration of his authority. I've been thinking about these shows of yours, Morrison continued, and I'm not sure they're the right fit for our establishment. See, the Cotton Club caters to a certain clientele. Respectable folks who expect a certain kind of entertainment. And from what I understand about your performances, well, let's just say it might not be appropriate for our audience. Prince listened without immediate reaction, but Steve Fargnoli immediately understood what was happening and began preparing to address what was clearly a breach of contract situation. Mr. Morrison, Steve interjected, we have a signed agreement for 3 performances. All deposits have been paid, tickets have been sold, and promotional materials have been distributed. If you're having second thoughts about the booking, we need to discuss this through proper legal channels. Morrison ignored Steve and continued addressing Prince directly, his voice gaining confidence as he spoke. The thing is, Morrison said, I've been getting some feedback from my regular customers about these upcoming shows. Seems like some folks are uncomfortable with the idea of certain types of entertainment being featured at a respectable venue like the Cotton Club. Prince's expression remained calm, but something in his eyes changed as he began to understand what Morrison was actually saying. What type of entertainment are you referring to, Mr. Morrison? Prince asked quietly. Morrison's mask of polite indirection finally dropped completely. I don't care how famous you are, boy. This is a respectable establishment for respectable people. We don't book your kind of music. And we sure don't book your kind of performer. The words hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be misunderstood or rationalized away. Morrison had just explicitly stated racial discrimination in front of multiple witnesses, including Prince's management team and his own business associates. Before we reveal how Prince responded to this blatant racism and what he did in the following 72 hours to ensure that Morrison's discrimination became the most expensive mistake of his business career, let me ask you, have you ever witnessed someone's prejudice blind them to the consequences of their actions? Have you seen discrimination backfire spectacularly on those who practice it? Share your thoughts in the comments, because what happened next became a masterclass in how economic power can be used to make racism financially unsustainable. Prince looked at Morrison for a long moment, his expression showing no anger or surprise. Just the kind of calm assessment that successful people make when they encounter obstacles that need to be systematically removed. Mr. Morrison, Prince said quietly, I want to make sure I understand what you're telling me. You're canceling our contracted performances because of my race? I'm canceling because this venue isn't the right fit for your type of entertainment, Morrison replied, still attempting to maintain deniability despite his earlier explicit comments. And what type is that? Prince asked. Morrison looked around at his supporters, then back at Prince. The type that attracts the wrong crowd to a respectable establishment. Prince nodded slowly. I see. Steve, please document Mr. Morrison's statements carefully. We'll need accurate records for the legal proceedings. Prince turned to leave, then paused and looked back at Morrison. Mr. Morrison, you just made the biggest mistake of your business career, but I'm going to let you discover that for yourself. Prince left the Cotton Club that afternoon without arguing, without threats, without any of the emotional responses that Morrison had probably expected. Instead, Prince went directly to his hotel and spent the next 6 hours on the phone with his attorney, his business manager, and his extensive network of industry contacts. What Prince understood, but Morrison didn't, was that the entertainment industry had evolved far beyond the racial hierarchies that Morrison still believed governed business relationships. Prince had connections with promoters, venue owners, booking agents, and record executives across the entire country, many of whom controlled significant portions of the touring industry. More importantly, Prince had something Morrison hadn't considered: economic leverage that extended far beyond a single performer canceling 3 shows. Prince's first call was to his attorney, who immediately began preparing breach of contract litigation against the Cotton Club. But the legal action was just the beginning of Prince's response. Prince's second series of calls went to every major booking agency in the music industry. Within 24 hours, word had spread throughout the entertainment world that the Cotton Club in Memphis had engaged in explicit racial discrimination against one of the industry's biggest stars. The response was immediate and devastating. Live Nation, the largest concert promotion company in the country, immediately canceled all future bookings at the Cotton Club and informed Morrison that no Live Nation artists would perform at his venue until further notice. William Morris Agency, which represented dozens of major touring acts, issued a similar directive, effectively blacklisting the Cotton Club from their booking considerations. But Prince wasn't finished. His third series of calls went to record companies, radio stations, and music industry publications. Within 48 hours, Rolling Stone magazine was preparing a major article about racism in Southern venue management, with the Cotton Club's discrimination against Prince as the centerpiece example. Local Memphis radio stations, many of which had significant black listenership and had been supporting Prince's music heavily, began announcing boycotts of any events held at the Cotton Club. But Prince's most devastating action was yet to come. On September 17th, exactly 72 hours after Morrison's racist declaration, Prince announced that he would be performing 3 free concerts at the Mid-South Coliseum, Memphis's largest venue, with all proceeds from merchandise and concessions donated to local civil rights organizations. The announcement created a media sensation that completely overshadowed any positive coverage the Cotton Club might have received. Prince's free concerts were positioned as a direct response to racial discrimination, making support for Prince's shows equivalent to support for civil rights, while any continued association with the Cotton Club became equivalent to support for racism. The financial impact on the Cotton Club was immediate and catastrophic. Ticket holders for Prince's original Cotton Club shows demanded refunds, but since Morrison had canceled the performances, he was contractually obligated to return all money, while receiving no revenue to offset the refund costs. Corporate sponsors who had been planning events at the Cotton Club began canceling their bookings, unwilling to associate their brands with a venue that had been publicly identified as racially discriminatory. Local bands and musicians who had been regular Cotton Club performers began refusing bookings, understanding that performing at Morrison's venue would damage their credibility with black audiences and industry professionals. But the most devastating blow came when several major record labels informed Morrison that any venue associated with racial discrimination would be excluded from promotional tour support for their artists. By the end of September 1984, the Cotton Club had lost over $2 million in canceled bookings and was facing legal expenses that would ultimately cost Morrison another $800,000 in settlement fees and attorney costs. Prince's free concerts at the Mid-South Coliseum were attended by over 25,000 people each night, generating massive positive publicity for Prince, while demonstrating the economic impact of the audience Morrison had rejected. Local Memphis media covered Prince's response extensively, with editorials praising his dignity in the face of discrimination and his decision to turn a negative experience into positive action for civil rights organizations. The contrast between Prince's packed, celebratory free concerts and the Cotton Club's empty, boycotted venue made Morrison's business mistake undeniably clear to everyone in Memphis. By December 1984, Morrison was forced to sell the Cotton Club to avoid bankruptcy. The new owners immediately implemented non-discriminatory booking policies and reached out to Prince's management to invite him for future performances. Prince's response to their invitation was characteristic of his approach throughout the incident. Gracious but firm. "I appreciate the new management's commitment to equality," Prince's representative stated. However, Mr. Nelson's experience at that venue was so profoundly negative that he has chosen to work with other Memphis area venues for future performances. The Cotton Club never recovered its previous status as a premier Memphis venue. Under new ownership, it operated as a mid-level club until closing permanently in 1992. Raymond Morrison's other business interests also suffered long-term damage, as his public association with racial discrimination made him a liability for any entertainment-related ventures. When Prince died in 2016, one of the tributes published in the Memphis Commercial Appeal specifically mentioned his response to the Cotton Club incident. Prince showed Memphis that racism isn't just morally wrong, it's economically stupid. His dignified response to discrimination made this a better city for all performers. The incident became a case study in business schools and civil rights organizations about how economic pressure could be used to combat institutional discrimination more effectively than legal action alone. Today, Memphis venues actively promote their commitment to diversity and inclusion, partly because the entertainment industry learned from Prince's demonstration that discrimination carries consequences that extend far beyond individual incidents. The lesson Morrison learned too late was simple but profound. In an interconnected industry, discriminating against one artist means alienating an entire network of relationships that control access to talent, audiences, and revenue. Prince Rogers Nelson proved that the most powerful response to racism isn't always confrontation. Sometimes it's demonstration that prejudice is a luxury that discriminators can't afford when their victims have the resources and relationships to make bigotry financially unsustainable. If this story reminds you that economic justice is often more effective than legal justice in changing behavior, and that true power lies in having the ability to make discrimination cost more than it's worth, please subscribe to keep these stories alive. Because the world needs more examples of how strategic action can transform individual prejudice into industry-wide change.